to Hillcrest Church Video. We hope this message will help you grow.
We, as a church community, we've been going through this, 2,700-year-old prophetic book by the author Isaiah, and kind of going through these teachings and oracles by Isaiah. We're not even halfway through the book yet, but I think we have encountered all sorts of really just fascinating, inspiring things, challenging things in this book of Isaiah. We're going to continue today. If you like to follow along, we're going to be in Isaiah chapter 20, and you can start flipping there in your Bibles now, Isaiah chapter 20. But before we read Isaiah 20 this morning, I want to show a clip of a man. His name is Abraham Joshua Heschel. And Heschel was a rabbi who lived and wrote in the 20th century, wrote a number of books, deeply thoughtful man, very insightful into the spiritual life. And in 1973, he did this interview on NBC. It's the last live interview that he ever gives. It's very towards the end of his life. And at the very end of this last interview, the interviewer asks Heschel, is there any, if you just had a minute to say a few things to the young people of this generation, what would you say to them? And he says some, to me, very poignant, powerful things. I want to watch a little bit of this clip. So could we play that now?
We have just about a minute or so left. I should say at the start of this hour, before we began this hour, Dr. Heschel indicated an interest in directing a message at young people, and I don't know that I ever in the past hour gave you the chance I promised you that I would give you.
I would say to young people a number of things, and I have only 1 minute. I would say let them remember that there is a meaning beyond absurdity. Let them be sure that every little deed counts, that every word has power, and that we can do everyone our share to redeem the world, in spite of all absurdities and all the frustration, all disappointments. And above all, remember that the meaning of life is to build life as if it were a work of art. You're not a machine. When you are young, start working on this great work of art called your own existence. The best way...
That's great. You can cut it there, yeah. So, do you catch one of those things, one of these lines in there that he says? He says, above all, remember you must build your life as if it were a work of art. And I wasn't watching that on YouTube. I was actually reading about this interview in a book recently, but I came across that line, remember, above all, you must build your life as if it were a work of art. And it's just stuck with me. It's one of these things that I've turned over in my mind and kind of just been... kind of reflecting on. What does that mean? What would that look like for my life? What is that? And I think one of the reasons it's kind of stuck with me is because that metaphor, build your life as a work of art, is very, it's really different than where I'm at in life right now. Because I'm in the raising young kids, young family season of life, which is not, that is more, it is work, clean, feed, bathe, collapse. Work, clean, feed, bathe, collapse. Work, clean, feed, bathe, collapse. That is kind of the season of life that I'm in. And these images came to my mind that one, this is the chair from my office chair. And this is the work, not just work, not just at vocationally, but even at home, but just get things done, be productive, be practical, be efficient, get it done. This is kind of this one mode of life that I'm in a lot of time. And then there's the collapse mode of life. And here's, a TV screen. And for me, at night, there's 45 minutes left before I fall asleep. And it's, get out the computer, watch Netflix. And I know it's for some people, maybe you are you watch artistic, soul-feeding things but I watch the Netflix equivalent of the Little Caesars Hot and Ready Pizza. That is what, it is just turn my brain off and just collapse. And these are kind of the, get entertained, get stuff done. These are that's kind of the season of life I'm in. And here, this kind of, word of wisdom catches me. What would it look like instead of just getting things done and just being entertained? But this other way of looking at life is building your life as if it were a work of art. And it's kind of opened up these other possibilities and just, it's challenged me. What would it look like to think about my life that way? And when Heschel says that, he's not saying we need to just be like impulsive and he would have spoke about wisdom and discipline, but it's a different mindset. What does it look like to create a beautiful life than just what does it look like to get stuff done and then be entertained? And so that's, and that's why we have Jenny up here, this other image. Like, what would it look like to think about life as something like a beautiful creation that we could create, a painting, rather than just an office chair or just entertainment. So with that in mind, I want you to have that in your head. And now we're going to take that to Isaiah 20. And I want you to hang with me here because we're going to read Isaiah 20. You're going to think, maybe, what on earth does this have to do with what you just said, Tim? But let's stick with it and see where it goes. So Isaiah chapter 20. I'm going to read the whole chapter and then make a few observations about it. So Isaiah 20. In the year that the supreme commander, sent by Sargon, king of Assyria, came to Ashdod and attacked and captured it, at that time, the Lord spoke through Isaiah, son of Amos. He said to him, "Take off the sackcloth from your body and the sandals from your feet." And he did so, going around stripped and barefoot. Then the Lord said, "Just as my servant Isaiah has gone stripped and barefoot for 3 years as a sign and portent against Egypt and Cush, so the king of Assyria will lead away stripped and barefoot the Egyptian captives and the Cushite exiles, young and old with buttocks bared, to Egypt's shame. Those who trusted in Cush and boasted in Egypt will be dismayed and put to shame. In that day, the people who live on this coast will say, 'See what has happened to those we relied on, those we fled to for help and deliverance from the king of Assyria? How then can we escape?'" It's Isaiah 20. So, the Isaiah 20, the idea that Isaiah is communicating in here is pretty simple, right? The idea he's communicating to the people in Jerusalem is trust in God, don't trust in Egypt and Cush, they'll fail. Like, don't trust in these other human kingdoms. Put your trust in God. That's the message he's communicating. But what I want to spend a little time reflecting on with you is how that message got communicated. Did anything stick out to you about this? Maybe, did you notice anything that surprised you in this section of Scripture? Sometimes when I'm preparing for a message, I'll brainstorm, how could I illustrate this? Or make this come alive for people, and I had some interesting brainstorming sessions on this passage. So we went with art and chair and TV screen. So, but really 3 years stripped around Jerusalem? Think about 3 years. 3 years ago was winter 2016. What were you doing in the winter of 2016? Ice skating on a lake. Fully clothed. Right? 3 years ago, Christian, you weren't here yet. I had a different house. We had a different president. I had less children in my family. A lot of things can change in 3 years. For 3 years, Isaiah goes around Jerusalem as this living prophetic message to the people of Jerusalem. His whole life is acting out this message to those in Jerusalem. I've got this notebook. Actually, I have multiple notebooks at this point. These things that I write ideas down, just things that I might want to teach about, or things that, I do our kind of Sunday morning teaching notes when somebody else, like Christian, you're teaching, I keep them in here. But one of the things I wrote down in here is 10 things Isaiah has taught me about preaching. I reflect on how do we preach, and what has Isaiah taught me about preaching? And one of the things that I wrote down in here is your whole life preaches. Your whole life speaks. Isaiah, it wasn't just about his words. That Isaiah had this mindset that his whole life spoke. And you look, what he wore and how he carried himself around Jerusalem for 3 years spoke to the people. What he named his children. A couple weeks ago, Christian talked about the names of Isaiah's children. He named his children in ways that reflected who God was and what Isaiah believed God was doing in the world. His whole life spoke. This is actually, a lot of the Hebrew prophets do this. Their whole life speaks. Jeremiah at one point walked around Jerusalem with an ox yoke on his shoulders. Ezekiel laid on his left side for over a year to make a point about who God was and what God was doing in the world. Their whole life, it's almost like, it's not quite, but it's almost like this performance art, this street theater, this kind of living display of who God is and what he's doing in the world. Their whole life spoke. And not only do these Hebrew prophets do this, but when we come to Jesus, we find, I think Jesus even takes this further. He even pushes this kind of further along. As I've thought about the life of Jesus, I would say almost everything Jesus does is this like living image of who God is and what God's up to in this world. Like so many of Jesus' actions have this deeper symbolic value to them. That they're not just the thing that's happening on the surface. So for example, you think about in the book of John, the first mighty deed that Jesus does. It's the wedding of Cana, right? He goes to this wedding, they're running out of wine, they fill these 6 jars up with water, he turns the water into wine. And yes, at one level, Jesus is solving a wedding reception logistics issue, right? But there's this whole kind of symbolic picture that he's painting, that these 6 jars of wine, it was like 180 gallons of wine, 1,000 bottles worth of wine. And in the Jewish world, that like wine and weddings is kind of the epitome of joy and celebration, a life to the full. And Jesus is painting this picture of like, I am the one who brings the ultimate joyous celebration to life, like the ultimate life to the full. He paints this picture. You think about the way he heals people and what he heals. When he heals a leper, he doesn't need to touch the leper. He could do it with his words, but he does this symbolic action. I am going to physically touch you, to say something to those watching. Or even the types of healings that Jesus does. He heals a lot of blindness, deafness, muteness. He heals hands and feet. How many ulcers do you know that Jesus took care of? I'm sure people had stomach issues, but we never read about anything. Like, why is it the eyes, ears, mouth, hands, feet? Because in this like ancient worldview, that when an image of a god, when you like brought it to life, you'd open its eyes and ears and mouth and you set it on its feet, and that like brought the image to life. And it says Jesus is communicating. He's painting a picture. I am the one that restores the image of God in people. I restore people's full humanity. He's painting this picture. Or who he eats with. Like one of the things that Jesus is really known for, a lot of people talk about, is that he's eating with tax collectors and prostitutes, people on the margins of society. And yes, Jesus wants those individuals, like he wanted, hey, Joe, tax collector, I want you to know that you're invited in my kingdom, that individual. But also, simply by him having those meals with those people, he's painting a picture. This is what my kingdom looks like. Like a living picture. You want to know what the kingdom led by Jesus looks like? It looks like this. Or like the night before he ends up being executed, he's with his close followers. He's about to leave them, and he looks around the room, and you know what he thinks to himself? There's a lot of dirty feet in here. Somebody has to take care of this like dirty feet problem. I'm just going to get everybody's feet washed up. No, it's not just like practical. Like it's less than 24 hours before he dies, and Jesus takes his outer cloak off. He wraps a towel around his waist, and he kneels down and he washes his disciples' feet. Why? Not just like to keep the floor clean. He could just with his words, hey, if you're going to follow me, you need to be a servant. He could just say it with his words, but he doesn't just do that. He does this action. He kneels and he washes their feet. He's painting a picture. This is what the kind of God I am. I am the kind of God that washes the bottom of your feet. The crucifixion, even his death, like he coordinated, he knew that what would happen, and he arranged it so when he came to Jerusalem, Tens of thousands of people were in Jerusalem for the Passover festival. So there'd be all these people to witness it, and they were celebrating when God rescued people, when he brought them to freedom through the blood of the Lamb on the doorways. And they were worshiping this God and praying that he would rescue them again. And Jesus arranges it so he will be executed while all these people are here celebrating the rescue of God. Like this is, art isn't quite the right word because that's almost like it's just self-expression or something like this. But he is painting a picture. He's creating something. His whole life is speaking about who he is and what he does. And then he gives his followers things to do like eat bread and drink wine and be immersed in water. And what are these things other than living pictures? They're acted out pictures of what getting life from his death looks like. Right? We're invited to do these things ourselves. I don't know. I find it interesting. Imagine that we had the life of Jesus on videotape, and you could put it on mute and watch Jesus' life with no sound. No words, no sound. But you saw his actions. Like, wouldn't you still go away from that feeling like this man lived a compellingly beautiful life? There is something different about this man. His death, his resurrection, who he ate with, how he healed people. That you wouldn't say his life is pretty. It's not cute. That's not what I mean. But even in the pain of it, you would say this is a beautiful, compelling picture of what human life can be. I would feel that way. But then I find where my mind goes is I start thinking about my own life. And actually, this is kind of invite you into the strangeness of the way I think sometimes, but I do this sometimes where I'll imagine, say we're sitting around the dining room table, Christy and I and our kids, and we're talking, and maybe there's fighting going on, we're trying to resolve something. In my head, I'll just start to imagine, what would it be like to be a third-party observer watching all of this without sound right now? And I like, what children are we paying attention to? What children are we ignoring? What does my body language say? Am I smiling? Am I frowning? Who do we always turn to? Who's kind of making the decisions here? Even though you can tell who's making the decisions, even with the sound off. But and I think about, but then I for this idea this morning, like, what would it be like for me to watch my entire life without sound? Like, what would that look like? If I watched my life on mute, would it look more like me being productive and getting a lot of stuff done? Would it look like me collapsing and just trying to be entertained? Or like, would there be moments where that is beautiful? Like it's creating something beautiful. If you looked at your life with the sound off, what would it look like? I've been thinking about the church in North America. And I read this quote about the church in North America, but I have no idea where I read it or who said it, so I'm going to just claim it as my own idea right now. But it was this idea that the church in North America, we are better at creating CEOs and celebrities than we are at creating saints. We're better at creating CEOs and celebrities than saints. That we're good at creating CEOs, and I don't use that in a derogatory sense, like leaders, like effective leaders. We create effective organizations, Compassion and World Vision and InterVarsity, Campus Crusade, like mega churches, and we have effective leaders, wise leaders that know how to lead these big organizations in good ways. That's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's all sorts of stuff about leadership out there, and we're good at creating celebrities, influencers, and I'm thankful for the sermons of Beth Moore and Tim Keller and people who are compelling communicators of the gospel. That's a good thing. But how many Mother Teresas do we create? How many people of just profound lives of moral and spiritual beauty? It's just, And I think about someone like Mother Teresa, this life of just profound spiritual beauty. And I think in her, the sacrifice of her life did more to lead people to Jesus in the kingdom, to paint a picture of Jesus in the kingdom, than any megachurch pastor of the last century. Pope Benedict was talking about what leads people to Jesus. And he said this. He said, the only really effective apologia, that's like argument for Christianity, comes down to two arguments. Namely, the saints the church has produced and the art which has grown in her womb. And what Benedict is saying is, he's saying there's these two things that seem to really lead people to Jesus. Saints, that's beautiful lives. Lives of profound moral and spiritual beauty. And then beautiful art. Art that reflects the beauty of God. And that beauty in lives and beauty in art, that seems to lead people to Jesus. And maybe you hear that and you think that's overstating the case, and there's more than that, and that may be the case. But I do think there's an insight there that is worth listening to. A lot of you know Jeff Mumley. He's on college ministry staff here, and he shared the story that I think captures what Benedict is talking about. That Jeff grew up in Kenya, and he was going to a Christian high school over there in Kenya. And in his high school years, like a lot of people do, he was trying to figure out who he was and what he believed and make sense of where do I stand with Jesus. And like any Christian high school, I suppose, at least this one, for him, there were people who were really authentic about their faith, and there were people that felt pretty hypocritical to him at the time. And he was trying to figure, like, what do I think about this? What do I think about this, Jesus? Where do I stand? And he had a math teacher there, and he heard about how this math teacher lived, and he didn't hear it from the teacher, heard it actually from the teacher's son. But this math teacher, every Sunday morning, before this math teacher went to church, would go to this slum in Nairobi. And in this slum in Nairobi, there was a home for disabled men. It was run by these Catholic nuns, these men who were just incapable of physically caring for themselves. And this math teacher would go there every week, and he'd have the men line up, and one at a time, he would give them kind of these deluxe hot shaves. You know, all the lotions and creams and hot towels, and he's just men who couldn't shave their own face. He'd shave their face for them. And then he'd go about his day and go to church. And for my friend Jeff, this image of a man who just secretly sacrificed his time just to give the gift of dignity to the forgotten. It was this act of beauty that for Jeff kept him walking towards Jesus. That if Jesus does that in people's lives, I'm interested. And I think that quote, this idea that it's the beauty of God reflected in human lives, draws people to God, draws people to Jesus. I do think there is something to that. So maybe a question for us to reflect on this morning. If you're a follower of Jesus, is there someone's life of beauty that has drawn you towards Jesus? Like when you think about the people you've observed and been around and influenced you, whose life or act of beauty has drawn you to Jesus? Or maybe you're here this morning and you'd say you're a skeptic, you're a seeker, you're questioning, you're asking questions about Jesus. If you're here and you're curious about Jesus, my guess is somebody's life has made you curious. Whose life of beauty has made you curious about Jesus? And even for those, if you're here, here's the thing. If you're here and you're like, I'm not sure about Jesus, I don't even know if there's a God in this universe, I would ask you this question to reflect on. Because I think if you say that there is no God, that all that is real is the material and the physical, I really think beauty is hard to deal with. beautiful lives or beautiful art. Because if there's no kind of more to this life, no transcendent realm, no God, then when you encounter these moments like a beautiful act or a beautiful life like Mother Teresa, or an act like this teacher shaving these men's faces, or even a beautiful work of art, and you're profoundly moved by these things, what do you do with that if there's no God? Because don't you have to say something like, because of natural selection, my brain is predisposed to have good feelings towards these combinations of images and experiences, and it's releasing serotonin, and that's why I'm having this good feeling. But it's not connected to a transcendent realm. Like, it's just, that's all that's going on. And I think for the follower of Jesus, I mean, there's still kind of things going on in our actual brains, but I think there's this deeper meaning that we can attach to it, that we can say as a follower of Jesus, when I encounter beauty, I am touching, somehow it's a shadow or a reflection, or like just that little beam of light coming between the cracks, that somehow I'm seeing the beauty of the transcendent God who created all things, who is beautiful, capital B, in and of himself. It's connected to something bigger. All right, so let's pull this all together. Takeaways from Naked Isaiah. This is like, when you're at lunch today and you're sitting down, you can be like, so Isaiah was naked for 3 years. What do you think that means for your life this week? And you all can figure out what that means for your life this week. But I have just kind of a few reflections on what we might do with this. Takeaways. One, as I've thought about this, I would say the church needs artists. The church needs artists. The church needs people who are captivated by the beauty of God in Jesus and who find ways to communicate that through all sorts of mediums. Who make the beauty of God touchable and experienceable for people. We need artists to provoke and ask questions and make beauty. And I'm thankful for people like Jenny and the art team that Carlo oversees and the art that we bring in to this building. And I would say we need the next generation. We need new artists who are captivated by the beauty of Jesus and thinking about how to communicate that. The church needs artists. Secondly, I'd say we need our vision of beauty to be shaped by Jesus. Because there's competing visions of what the beautiful life is out there. One of the great theologians who is pastored in the United States, his name is Jonathan Edwards. He actually lived hundreds of years ago, and this Edwards scholar was summarizing Jonathan Edwards' thought. And he summarized it this way, that Edwards because Edwards talked a lot about the beauty of God, and what Edwards, kind of the summary of his thought is that sinners are beautified as they behold the beauty of God in Instagram. See, Edwards was way ahead of his time, and he saw, but the beauty of God in Jesus Christ. Because they're competing visions. There are going to be other stories about this is what the beautiful life looks like. And I think what is true is that our lives are made beautiful as we behold the beauty of God fleshed out in Jesus of Nazareth. And that we need to be people if Jesus is our master and our rabbi and our sensei and our king, we need to be people who know him. Not just know things about him, but know him and spend time with him. That we know him and his life and his teachings, his death, and his resurrection so well that our imagination, our unconscious, our subconscious is captured by him. That is just what naturally shapes. The kind of life we lean towards is the life that looks like Jesus. So our vision of beauty needs to be shaped by Jesus. And then 3, I would just encourage us this week, try and experiment. Experiment in beauty. What would it look like to try something where you think about it? This isn't practical, and it's not just for my entertainment. It's just a picture of what Jesus is like. We're reading book as a pastoral staff called The Art of Pastoring. And in there, the author uses this idea that as followers of Jesus, our lives can be parables of Jesus. A parable is a story where you say, this thing is like that thing. What would it look like to do actions and live where it's like, I'm painting something, I'm doing something here, so that when you look at it, you'd be left with the impression, oh, that's what Jesus is like. I even think about for my own self as I parent. What would it look like for me to engage my kids, not just, care for their physical needs, and not just, me, recharge my batteries, but what would it look like for me? There's a mom that I know, one of the things she does is every year on the kids' birthdays, she writes them a letter that she'll let them open when they turn 18. Just an act of beauty. What would it look like for me to think, how can I do a beautiful thing for my kids? Not just practical, not just check, but to let our lives speak to the beauty of Jesus. So that's what I've been reflecting on. I've been reflecting on Isaiah, his whole life speaking. I've been reflecting on Heschel saying, build your life as a work of art. I've been thinking about Jesus and how all these different ways, his whole life shows what the heart of God and his kingdom look like. And I think I just want to invite you into that with me and to reflect together. What would it look like for us to be a people who build our lives as a work of art that reflects the beauty of Jesus? Let's pray. Abba, Father, Jesus, Messiah, Spirit of life, you are beautiful, not in a trite way, but you are good and worth pursuing in and of yourself. You are inherently valuable. You are inherently good. And I would ask, Jesus, even this morning, that you would capture not just our minds, but capture our imaginations, capture our emotions, capture our will, that we would be drawn towards you. Capture us in the places of our lives where maybe we've run out of ideas of how to be and how to act and what to say. Would you open up new possibilities because we are drawn to live a life that reflects your beauty. Draw us to yourself even now by your Spirit. In your name, amen.
Thanks for connecting with Hillcrest Church. For more info on this and other sermons, visit us online at hcbellingham.com or join us at 9 or 11 a.m. any Sunday morning, 1400 Larrabee Ave, Bellingham, Washington.